You are Locked On Tigers Postcast, part of Locked On Sports Detroit on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome into a live Locked On Tigers Postcast. I'm your host, Jake Rietma. You can follow me on Twitter at Jake_Rietma. Twins steal the weekend series from the Tigers in rather dominating fashion. 5-0, the final in this one. We'll break down the bullpen day, the offense being shut down, and the latest surrounding the MLB trade deadline. That's all coming up next on this live edition of Locked On Tigers Postcast. But first, as always, we thank you for making Locked On Tigers Postcast your first listen following the final out of the game. Don't forget, we've got Locked On Lions Postcast coming this fall, Locked On Pistons Postcast. It's all going to be great. And let me remind you, we're free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, on YouTube, it's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by Supply House and supplyhouse.com, the reliable way to get parts fast. Shop your next plumbing, HVAC, or electrical job and get fast shipping from coast to coast at supplyhouse.com. All right. Final game of the series doesn't go particularly well. A bullpen day. Alex Faedo starts for the Tigers and looked a little shaky. I know, unfortunately, in the home half or the top of the first inning, rather, just beginning that game, he had the hit batter on Miranda. He had to leave the game. Scary moment, just two batters in. But the bullpen day, it wasn't a thing of beauty, but it's where this team is at because they don't have any arms left. And I know that's repetitive in nature, but again, that's just the fact of the matter with this roster construction where it's at. There's no pitcher, there's no starting pitching on this team. And interesting comments, I think, surrounding MLB as a whole regarding the trade deadline, that you can make moves and all of a sudden everybody wants to put these teams into the buckets of buyers or sellers. And sometimes it's not always that simple. For example, with the Tigers, you hold on to some of these guys and understand what your team potentially could be when at full strength. And I don't think that necessarily constitutes as buying or selling, just given the state of where this team is at right now. The big trade in MLB today, Isaac Paredes, our old friend, that's right, Isaac Paredes, who was once in our organization and went to Tampa on that deal for, make sure I say the right one, I believe it was Austin Meadows, that's right, and now is on its Paredes heading to Chicago. And the Cubs like the idea of having a couple of years of control. We won't get into the weeds too much on that, but point being, this team, it's hard to determine and hard to get a true feel and benchmark feeling of where this team is at given the injuries, because, you know, AJ Hinch has had a lot of success with bullpen days. Most recently, the final game of the series against the Guardians, a bullpen day where you shut out a really good baseball team. It's going to happen from time to time, but then there's going to be games like today where it's hard to put your best foot forward when you're not at full strength, and it's a bullpen day, and Faedo was fine. I mean, Kenta Maeda, talk about me having to eat my words with Kenta Maeda. I mean, I thought the best days for him were, completely in the rear view mirror, but he was all right today. 5 innings, and granted, it's relatively low leverage situations coming in long relief when your team's already down, but 5 innings, just 1 run allowed. It was an earned run, gave up or struck out 4 rather. And so Kenta Maeda was all right today. And not that you want to make a habit of these bullpen days, but if there's somebody to come in and eat some innings, and it's Kenta Maeda, who was absolutely terrible for the bulk of his Tigers tenure, this being the 1 year. And of course, he's on a 2-year deal. I guess if you truly try to find a silver lining, which the broadcast does a good job of doing, today was one of those productive days for Kenta Maeda. But Alex Faedo gave up an earned run in an inning work. Easton Lucas wasn't exactly sharp. He gave up 2 hits in his 1 inning of work. And then Shelby Miller down the stretch with Jason Foley, who didn't even record an out. I know, again, albeit low leverage situation, but in that 9th inning, he gives up the 2 hits, and then Chafin comes in and limits the damage there in the 9th inning to 2 runs. I say limits the damage, but I this one had the the make of, or just the feeling that this offense wasn't going to do anything. I mean, completely shut down by Bailey Ober, and 8 innings scoreless from start to finish. You just felt like it was one of those games where this Tigers offense just doesn't have a pulse. And unfortunately, we've been accustomed to seeing that. We saw it a lot in June, a little end of June, I should say, a little bit in May, a lot in June. And then the offense, to their credit, it's worth saying they'd been one of the best offenses in all of Major League Baseball. And then today it was just like a glimpse into what this team was for what felt like an entire month there in the month of June. But you would have loved to see the Tigers find a way to win this series, especially with the electricity that was in the ballpark last night with Scooble, with the Colt Keith big day at the plate, and they just weren't able to carry that momentum into a series-defining win here in the rubber match of the 3-game series. So Twins take game 1, Tigers take game 2, and Twins earn the series win in the rubber match. So let's get to your comments. Appreciate everybody tuning in as always. And this is your friendly reminder. If you haven't subscribed to Locked On Sports Detroit, what the heck you waiting for? And go ahead and tell a friend as well. As always, Jason Walter, if they lose, then it's sell, sell, sell. If they win, buy, 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 right? Isn't that how it works? But yes, sell, sell, sell. YouTube user in agreement with that. Although worth pointing out, appreciate this one. Kenta was pretty good. Agree. Gareth Ridings, with the trade deadline coming up, they will be looking for a starter in return for Flaherty. Yeah, Flaherty is the one that's been more rumored to be on the go. You heard the audio of Dan Dickerson the other night saying this was not Tarek Skubal's last start in a Tigers uniform. Let's hope he's right. I think the Tigers are going to hold on to and then this could be the clip that everybody plays. Yeah, the Tigers are going to hold on to Tarek Skubal, and then he gets traded and so on and so forth. But yeah, Flaherty could be the one that's on the move. The rumors I'm hearing, the Tigers are actively shopping him, according to Bob Nightingale, but the same time, they want to make sure they're getting the best deal in return. So what that package in return looks like, Gareth here makes a good point. It's probably going to include a starter as well. Demetrius McNeil, Bailey Ober, single-handedly breaking the Tigers' fun. 1 hit, and their hitting is swollen. Prepare for the Guardians once again. Yep, that's next. 2-game series against the Cleveland Guardians. Don't have to wait, which is kind of nice. Sometimes, those weekend series end in less than stellar fashion. You got to have that off day on Monday before you get going to it, or vice versa, but no off day tomorrow. It's right back into or continuing the homestand, I should say, with 2 against the Guardians. And then I believe it's the Royals. I know we talked about that, how so many games against the American League Central. And indeed, I am correct. We love it when that happens. The rare occasion I'm correct. Then yes, a 4-gamer with the Royals that begins on Thursday. So the off day this week will be on Wednesday. So that being said, then you go to Seattle. They're fighting for the AL West, and then continue the West Coast trip to San Francisco for the Giants, and then back home to play those same Mariners. And the Yankees come to town through the middle of August before heading to the Windy City, Wrigleyville, to take on the Chicago Cubs. But we won't go through the entire schedule. You get the idea. So Tigers drop this one. Final score 5-0. 1 in the second for the Twins, 1 more in the third, 1 in the seventh, and then 2 in the ninth. And offensively, the Tigers just limited to 1 hit. That's right, 1 hit, completely shut down by Bailey Ober, who gets his 10th win of the season. He goes 8 innings, allows, like I said, just the 1 hit, 11 strikeouts. So not only were the Tigers not finding a way to get a hit, they were also not finding a way to even put the ball in play. I mean, 11 strikeouts. That's pretty impressive there for Bailey Ober. 10-5 on the season now, and Faedo, like I said, gets hit with the loss. He's 5-2. He was the opener today, which is why he was responsible for that. He pitched into the second inning, but was responsible for the first run that crossed the board. Gave up the 2 hits, 1 earned, 3 strikeouts, did not walk a batter. So that is about as simple as we can make it. No offense for the Tigers, a bullpen day where the bullpen was fine. You can win a lot of games only giving up 5 runs, but when you come up with 1 hit, that's you're not going to win many games and you don't score a run. It's pretty much as simple as that. So we'll talk a little bit more about that bullpen and riff about the trade deadline as well as this edition of Locked On Tigers Postcast continues on. Don't go anywhere. Back in a moment. This episode of Locked On Tigers Postcast is brought to you by Stitch Fix. That's right. Listen, you know what that feels like to get that instant confidence boost. Javi Baez had it for the first time in a Tigers uniform, and it lasted all of 3 games. It was fun while it lasted, but confidence boost at the plate, and you can get that confidence boost from an outfit that makes you look and feel really good. And that's how I feel when I wear Stitch Fix. With Stitch Fix, you get a stylist who understands your style and budget, and they do all the shopping for you. It's the easiest way to update your wardrobe this season. You can easily upgrade your wardrobe this year with a professional stylist as well that helps you find new on-trend favorites that will work for you. Listen, guys, I got a lot of flaws, a lot of them. I'm not good at a lot of things, and that's when, and you could add fashion to that. That's where Stitch Fix comes in. You just give your stylist your size, your style, your budget preferences, and you order boxes when you want. And you know what? There's no subscription required. Super nice. You can send at least 5 for me pieces plus outfit recommendations and pro styling advice. All that keeps it simple on what works, and send back the rest if you don't like it. Your stylist always sends just right pieces, and the fit is on point. It's like they have style ESP. I don't know how they do it, but they just get it. So style that makes you feel as good as you look. Get started at stitchfix.com/MLB and get $20 off your first fix. That's stitchfix.com/MLB for $20 off. We'll give it to you one more time. stitchfix.com/MLB for $20 off. You got to try it for yourself, and you must redeem this within 7 days of signing up. Offer does not include kids fixes. We love the kids, but this offer does not include them. So one more time, stitchfix.com/MLB for $20 off. And if you don't love something, send it back. Shipping, returns, and exchanges always free. How about that? Shout out to Stitch Fix. All right, a couple more comments to get to, and we'll continue to riff to close out the weekend before the Cleveland Guardians come to town. And kind of a bummer about this game, in addition to the Twins taking the weekend series, they take the season series as well, 7 games to 6. So these two teams played each other relatively even all the way throughout, and it's a defining win for the Twins, winning 5-0. They now take the season series 7 games to 6. All right, a couple more comments. Jason Walter, 1 hit number. You can't say that on the radio. 1 hit. Yeah, good point. I don't know what you mean by that. Tigers can't hit, period. Yeah, that's I would agree with that. Again, when you get 1 hit, you're not going to win the game. It's as simple as that. But other things going on around Major League Baseball. Again, when you look at the bullpen day that the Tigers had today, it's no secret they need starting pitching. Flaherty might be a guy that's on the way out, according to Bob Nightingale. The Tigers are actively shopping him, and if he's the guy that goes, you'd have to look back at Scott Harris, and there has to be some accountability with the fact that the fact that you signed him to a 1-year deal, and to his credit, he resurrected his deal resurrected his career in a Tigers uniform, and now he has a lot more value than, say, I don't know what he had at the offseason when the Tigers brought him on last year. But you also have to wonder why, or what thought process went in, and why he was given the 1-year deal in comparison to Kenta Maeda, who was the 2-year deal. And clearly, and this is a good day to talk about it because he was actually really good out of the bullpen. But going from a starter you're counting on to not having a chance to win when he takes the mound as a starting pitcher, that's a black eye on the front office and the value or perceived value that they thought they had with Kenta Maeda, and he just isn't that anymore. And it might end up, who's to say what would happen with Flaherty if you had one more year of team control, and maybe he still would be a guy that would be being shopped on the deadline, considering the Tigers of where they are right now, a couple games under 500 and so far out of it for sure in the Central, and starting to become out of it in the wild card, depending on how optimistic you're feeling for that that particular day. But I think depending on what happens with Jack Flaherty, if maybe you get a haul in return, then sure, it was a good signing. I'm not saying that. I think it's a glaring note that Maeda was signed for 2 years and Flaherty only signed for 1. And a good point here from, let me make sure I say this name right, Last Raps Baseball. You could Flaherty qualifying offer. Yeah, correct. I think that's part of the discussion too, is maybe Flaherty becomes a Tiger long-term and you work on a long-term deal to keep him in Detroit. I think there's value in that. Absolutely. Because you want to be able to get compensation if he does decline that offer, because you don't want him to walk for nothing, essentially, is what we're getting at. The way Rodriguez walked for nothing at the end of this past year. And I know he's been hurt and hasn't done anything for the Diamondbacks, but the way Scott Harris just butchered that trade deadline scenario with the Dodgers last year, where they had a trade, and you have to know that a player is going to exercise. You have to know if a player plans on exercising his no trade clause and veto powers like he did with the Dodgers. Like you got to know that. And unfortunately, that wasn't the case as Scott Harris went through it last year. So that being said, a couple more days before the MLB trade deadline, today being July 28th, we've got tomorrow and then on Tuesday in the afternoon. I got to double check what exactly the final hour of the trade deadline is, but every GM working their phones, wanting to be like, what's the guy's name on Moneyball? Jonah Hill. That's right. I know he's the assistant, but not Brad Pitt playing Billy Bean on Moneyball with the A's. Always a classic movie, even though it was not exactly the most accurate movie. And I think if you talk to enough A's fans, they'll point out where the shortcomings in that film are. But just to put a picture on it all, yeah, we're all envisioning Scott Harris and the Tigers front office working the phones and seeing what magic might happen before the conclusion of the trade deadline. But speaking of magic, Locked On Tigers is just one little branch of the Locked On Network. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and it's now also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top stories of the days with the local experts of Locked On, plus national shows covering every single league. You can find Locked On Sports Today available on the free Fire TV channels app. Locked On Tigers postcast, always a pleasure to be on the air. Johnny Bryles chiming in. Please trade someone. And why is Dingler not up yet? Great question. I would love to see a trade comprise that includes one of the catchers. I'm really not married to either one of them. I know Jake Rogers was like our last hope that maybe something good would have come from that Justin Verlander deal with the Houston Astros. I'm not, like I said, I'm certainly not waving you can't trade Jake Rogers flag. Maybe it'll be Carson Kelly, hasn't been here as long, but one of the catchers certainly has a value on a different roster that we could get something in return for. And that would then obviously allow for the call up of Dylan Dingler, because he deserves that. He's absolutely earned that. And I want to see what he's got. I want to see because I remember the hype about Dylan Dingler several years ago, and it's finally like, okay, can it be here? Is this true? And the way he's just been on a tear in AAA lends itself to certainly wanting to have the chance to see Dylan Dingler at the major league level. And appreciate that from Jason Walter. Is at 6 p.m. trade deadline. So there you go, 6 p.m. on Tuesday, the 30th. All right, we got one more segment in the books before we call it a weekend. Appreciate everybody's willingness to be on the Locked On Tigers postcast. I know I was off the last 2 days, connecting with some good friends, that sort of thing. It's a long season, 162 of these. So I appreciate everybody live and with me today here on Locked On Tigers postcast. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back in a moment on Locked On Tigers postcast. This episode of Locked On Tigers Postcast is brought to you by Supply House, supplyhouse.com. Listen up and listen good. I love telling you about Supply House because it's real simple. You don't need to take notes on this. I'm just going to give you everything you need to know. Supply House allows you to get supplies from the site that's made for the skilled trades. Supplyhouse.com. Supplyhouse.com is the reliable way to order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical products all online. Easy to use website packed with helpful resources and the latest product information to help you get the job done right. You can shop a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from over 400 top brands and get your order. This is my favorite part. So really listen up to this one. You get your order delivered to your door with fast shipping from coast to coast. And if you need help with an order, hey, don't worry. Expert support and industry-leading service from the friendliest folks in the business. And what a wild concept this is. You talk to a real person every time. None of those automated recordings. That's right. Because pros in the skilled trades know they can get a competitive advantage and a competitive edge by joining supplyhouse.com's free Trade Master program. Every Trade Master gets access to a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. So join the thousands of trade pros already benefiting from their free membership at supplyhouse.com/TM and order plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies from anywhere with just a few clicks at supplyhouse.com. And remember, you get shipping anywhere, coast to coast, friendly folks to talk to, no recordings. That's what it's all about. See for yourself, supplyhouse.com. All right, we wrap it up with a little bit more of a discussion about what the future of this Tigers team might look like. And you look at the wild card standings, and it's best way to put this is I like everybody else, where you just get so hyped up with the success of this team. And last night was a good example of it because the energy was in the building. You got Tarek Skubal on the mound. You've got your young guys hitting with Colt Keith, and you just see a little glimpse into what hopefully the future of this team is. And we're starving. We want it now. We want it now. We want it now. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that because this is a fan base that has dealt with this never-ending rebuild of the hamster on the wheel, running around and going nowhere. I mean, that's been what our rebuild has looked like, just the hamster running in the wheel, going nowhere. This rebuild has not come close to, paying off the way that it should. And Tigers fans they've been patient. And in 2024, I feel like now is the time because yes, this rebuild has felt like it's gone on and on and on. And if you sell at the deadline, it's another step backwards and so on and so forth. I get all that because you're starting to see some of the fruits of your labor come through with players like Riley Green. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of misses as well, Spencer Torkelson, and the list goes on there. But the young core somewhat being in place, along with the pitching that this team has, you're close. You feel like you're close to what this team could be and truly being a complete team that's capable of competing for meaningful baseball in the fall, in September, leading into obviously the postseason. Now, defining that and who's there and what it will take to get there, I happen to agree with Ben Verlander that the work has been done in terms of putting together that young core. Now, I don't know, open up the checkbook, spend a little bit of money and bring in some bats to help this team and help put the final pieces together in a smart way, not in a Javi Baez way. And if the means to the end is deemed by this front office that trading a piece or two could help accelerate that process to get you there for next year, I'm to the point where I'm okay with that. I'm not fully, this is not me coming in and saying I'm full sell, or I'm full buy. I am at the point where I think the core is in place. The pieces are there. Now it's all about the complementary pieces and what that looks like. Is it through free agency in the offseason? Is it through a trade of Jack Flaherty to bring some bats? But now obviously with the immediate future of the staff of the pitching, the health of the pitching staff needing to be taken into consideration, that's another factor with it as well. And it's a lot. I understand it. There's a lot of pieces to this. It's very complex. And that's why Scott Harris and his team make the big bucks. And that's why this organization, it's at a pivotal point in the future of this organization and what happens from here until the beginning of, I'll say next season. As early as next season, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying this is now a team where the expectations are to get back to relevancy in the American League, to get back to competing for divisions, to get back to playing meaningful baseball. And the time has come where we've put in the time. We've been patient long enough where it needs to happen sooner rather than later. And then if it doesn't, you got to start holding people accountable. It's as simple as that. I think the accountability in this town isn't always what I think it should be. And that's, that was one of the things we talked about on 97 Won the Ticket all the time is there's this coddling of the Tigers as an organization, and you're just so ready to be done with making excuses for why this team hasn't been good. And look at the Lions. All it took was a turnaround, and 2 years ago when they finished the way they did, still didn't get into the playoffs. You could see the writing on the wall. I'm starting to hope, and hope is not a strategy. Let's make that ever clear. Hope is not a strategy, but you're starting to see the steps be taken the way this Lions team made those steps 2 years ago to when, hey, the next year we know what they did, NFC championship game. Would have loved to see them win that game, obviously, but the turnaround and I know this is one of the most overused bits in sports, but the new culture and, not the same old Lions. If the Tigers can get to that point, man, this town's ready for it. And I think Saturday night was the perfect example of that because it was electric in the ballpark. You had Tarek Skubal, the best pitcher in baseball. You had young guys. And I keep using Colt Keith as the example, but boy, if he can be a superstar, my goodness, this will be a fun team. And maybe, just maybe, this is going to sound, and I should have been on yesterday because Javi Baez hit a home run. It would be a say something nice about Javi Baez. I hope he's not a part of the future of this team, to be honest, but 3 home runs in 3 games was good. Now, if he can sustain it, today he was terrible. He was absolutely terrible with a couple of those strikeouts that were just so far off the plate. And it was just so typical Javi Baez. But best way to put it is time will tell. And Locked On Tigers Postcast will always be here for you through the end of the Tiger season into the Lions season with the Locked On Lions Postcast, and of course Pistons and Locked On Pistons Postcast as well. Your post-game destination. That's why you subscribe. Appreciate everybody tuning in. As always, make sure you check out Locked On Tigers with Scott Bentley this week. I'm sure they'll have a lot of great coverage around the trade deadline. And as always, it is a pleasure and a joy to be on the air. Tigers fall to the Twins. Don't forget to join us tomorrow after the conclusion of Tigers Guardians. We'll be on the air after the final out is recorded, breaking it all down. And as for wildcard standings right now, Tigers would currently be 6 games back with the Red Sox, Mariners, and Rays all ahead of them. And the Twins and Royals would be your final 2, Yankees too, obviously, but Twins and Royals would be the 3 wild card teams right now. So tough to really make a push to buy when you're 6 games back, but from a wild card with 3 teams in front of you, one of them being the Rays that sold. So maybe, who knows? But it'll be fun to see how it all plays out. That's going to do it for me. We'll talk to you tomorrow at the conclusion of Tigers Guardians. Go enjoy the rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next time on Locked On Tigers Postcast.